What's up, everyone? I'm Joe Lemon. Thank you so much for tuning into the Real Value Exchange podcast. I've rebooted this whole podcast because I feel the need to really do something different. And I've took some time away. I've been focusing a lot on sales culture, where I'm helping other people, how they can really help market their actual brands or even build those partnerships by leveraging podcasting. So I got that thing rolling, that's up and moving, which is great. And I'm obviously always focused on the personal brand, but I'm rebooting the Real Value Exchange podcast because I feel a need in there. Or let me say this, I got pissed. I got mad about what was happening in healthcare, and I've been mad about it, but I've ignored that pain for a little bit, and I feel the need to kind of reactivate it, because at times I get frustrated with where we are, because I feel like there's a lot of things that we could be doing better. We're still so focused on the sick care, and we're not moving the needle, I feel like, enough towards preventative care. I know it's a big needle to move, so you got to have some patience there. But instead of being frustrated, instead of just being upset at what's not happening, I'd rather refocus and rechannel that energy towards something that's positive. So I'm choosing to kind of get this activated again and really, launch a series that's targeting the people, the entrepreneurs, the docs, the fitness pros, the nutritionists, and the local heroes and change agents that are out there doing things that are really helping people get healthier. Just that simple, right? It's people that are out there improving lives and pushing the whole healthcare system forward. I want to shine some light on them. So I'm going to launch off a series here where I'm going to just, interview people that are doing things throughout the U.S. really, that I think that are special really. And so I want to dive right into it today with a heavy hitter. I have Dr. Sherry Yafai, and man, she is an ER doc and a cannabis expert, and she's leveraging cannabis as medicine. So she jumped on right whenever the wave was first hitting with Recreational, and you guys are going to love this. This is going to be something that you guys can geek out on. You can learn a lot from about the whole space, because there's a lot of confusion there, and she's going to help clean it up. So with that said, sit back, get ready to enjoy this episode with Dr. Sherry, and if you like it,
because you were
get a 5-star
ER
rating.
doc.
That's
at
right.
first, right?
That's right, and I still am.
Oh,
so
okay.
I'm still in the ER, despite popular belief.
Really?
So I still spend. So let me kind of step back.
Please.
So I started my medical training back in the early 2000s. In 2005, I went to residency at UC San Diego and did emergency medicine. Left emergency medicine, graduated, came out back to Los Angeles, where I'm born and raised here in LA. And in 2009, I started working here at Providence St. John's in Santa Monica, a nice little community hospital. And since that time, I've really been in the ER full time, having 2 kids, came back, went on maternity leave, and came back full time both times.
Did you always know that you wanted to be an ER doctor? Was that something that was always on your heart?
I didn't. I knew I always wanted to be in medicine.
Yeah.
I didn't know where in medicine I fit. I realized very early on I have a very bubbly personality, and
that helps in the ER.
It helps in the ER, and I always say people who go into the emergency room or emergency department type medicine, they are people who like to tell a story. They are people who like to be in the space of adrenaline. They like to have their time at work, and then they like to leave. Because the one thing that emergency medicine provides is not just a lot of intensity at the time you're here, but a lot of freedom once you leave.
Interesting.
Which is really nice, because you don't get that from a lot of fields in medicine. And so most emergency medicine physicians are very outdoorsy. They like to travel. They like to not be tied down to the job.
Yeah.
So you can pick up and go really anywhere in the world and be an ER doctor, which is pretty amazing. You can't do that with a lot of other medical specialties.
I didn't think about that, but you're absolutely right, because people that run their own private practice, they're like tied to the practice, right?
That's absolutely
whether it's building up the business of the practice or their patients that are reaching out to them. They're on call a lot of times.
That's right.
I mean, but I would imagine once you're in it, you're like, okay, it's game time and there's nonstop action, I would imagine.
Right, it's nonstop action.
Yeah, but then you unplug.
It is, and I always say, it's like showing up and every day being handled a completely new specialty. So let's say today, and it tends to be something where, like today is chest pain day, and I'll just have, for some unknown reason, 5 to 10 patients who all have chest pain.
Wow.
And all for a variety of reasons. Or it'll be stroke day, and I'll have 4 or 5 different stroke patients. Or it'll be over the summer, really commonly we see a lot of falls, breaks, cuts, bruises, that type of thing. And it'll just be the day where everybody showed up from Santa Monica Pier because there was a bunch of kids playing at the park, what have you. So it tends to be thematic the day. Sure. For some reason. But other than that, it's a very adrenaline-packed day, and it leaves you just dead to the bones at the end of the day.
It's kind of interesting. So, are there any, because I have a couple of friends that work in the ER as well, but they always have great stories. Any great stories that you feel comfortable sharing? No pressure to if you don't, but anything that's that came in that was so...
Good question. So we'll stick with the theme of the day, because I always ask people, I get a lot of what's the best story you've ever had?
Yeah, I'm sure.
There's a lot of really great stories, and I actually even started limiting it to body parts, because there's a good story for every body part or every holiday.
Every holiday.
But lately I get really excited when there's a cannabis case in the ER, because, and everybody knows what I do now in the emergency department. I kind of came out of the closet about it over the last 2 years. I want to talk about this,
yes. Yeah.
And so now when a cannabis case comes in, they just go straight to me. They're like, Sherry, do you want this? And I say, yeah, of course I do. It's always exciting. But one of the most interesting cases, and one of the things that I want people, because we're not talking about it enough in kind of the regular world, right? We talk about how either people are very pro or people are very against.
True.
And I like to walk this kind of medium line. I'm not really pro or against as much as I am pro or against Viagra. I mean, it's the same thing to me. It's a medication. Yeah. It has indications, it has benefits, and it has side effects. And so to be able to talk about that really clearly in a regular medical fashion, to me, is really what draws me to it. So I had a case in the ER. About an 80-year-old guy comes in, and funny enough, so I'm Persian. You can't tell on the podcast, but I am Persian. And I'm about 5'2", so I'm not very tall. So people walk in, and most of the time they're like, "Where's the doctor?" And I kind of wave at them. But this gentleman, an 80-year-old Persian man, came in through the ambulance bay, and so they called me from my desk and said, "Hey, Dr. Yafai, will you come evaluate this patient?" I said, "Sure thing, no problem." I walk over to the ambulance bay, and he's dizzy, and he doesn't feel well, and he's nauseated, and he's about to vomit. And, one of the things that we have to be really careful of in the emergency department is making sure that this isn't a stroke. And so this can be one of two things. Typically is vertigo from a peripheral origin. So you're thinking about ears that cause vertigo, people who get vertigo just when they go out in the ocean, sea legs, that type of thing. Yep. Or you think about a cerebellar stroke or a brainstem stroke. And so those types of really fine details are what we have to be really careful about, especially given that he came on very quickly, he's of the right age, all the right temperaments, high blood pressure, etc. So we rushed him back. We did a full, multi-$1,000 workup to make sure he was not having a stroke. And, the wife came in, and she was completely frustrated and dismayed, and she quickly called her sons, on her cell phone, calls her sons, and your dad's having a stroke, come in to the emergency department. And within the hour, his, adult sons show up to the ER, and one of the adult sons says, "Hey, Dad, by the way, I noticed you drove my car this morning, and I left a Marshmallow Krispies treat, right? One of those Rice Krispie treats in the front seat. Did you happen to eat that?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "You ate the whole thing?"
Exactly.
I said, "Yeah."
Yeah.
And lo and behold, the whole room starts to erupt with laughter. And we realize, and by the way, all his tests and studies are normal. Everything's looking good, but he's still profoundly nauseated, profoundly dizzy, feels like the room is spinning around him. He's still miserable, but everyone starts laughing. And I walk into the room. I'm like, "What's going on?" They're like, "Doc, he had an edible." I'm like, "What do you mean he had an edible?" "He had my Krispies treat, my Rice Krispies treat edible." And I was like, "Oh my God." And of course, everyone's happy now. We give him medicine to help kind of quiet the nausea and to help quiet the dizziness. And he feels much better. And literally they walk out and they're like, "Doc, we're going to go get kebab." And I'm like, perfect. The Middle Eastern food of choice after we have an edible. So
that's perfect.
So that was one of, these moments where you're like, this can be actually a really potentially serious situation. One, not just because of the fear of a stroke or the thousands of dollars that time, resources, etc., that were spent and potentially wasted on this, but actually because if we didn't know that was the reason, he would have gotten hospitalized and he would have undergone multiple more tests.
True.
Okay. And so my biggest issue with the cannabis industry is they're saying in the industry is, if it doesn't work, take more.
Yeah.
Go higher, right? Like they really push the test your limits, see how high you can go kind of sort of thing. And then they have these anecdotes in their, on the webs and whatnot that, I won't even comment about. But the problem with that is that if it's the wrong person,
mm-hmm.
if it's somebody who does have heart disease and high blood pressure and is at risk for these situations, we don't know what that tipping point is yet.
Right.
And not just that, but people are going to get medications that are not good for them because we think they're having something like a stroke. So right now in the Los Angeles area, I know that between myself, UCLA, and Cedars, so St. John's, UCLA, and Cedars, in the emergency department, there's been about, half a dozen patients who've come in with similar presentations like this and have gotten TPA, which is a life-saving medication for a stroke, but it's also a very aggressive blood thinner that can cause bleeding in your brain.
Wow.
That's, a 1 to 5% chance. And so if we give that to the wrong person, then we're actually going to cause their brain to bleed. So it's one of these things that we have to be really conscientious about. And we're not talking about it to the right people. And the right people is, everyone.
The public.
The public.
100%. And, I'm really glad that you chose that story to tell because to me, that's one of the gray areas about this industry. I love it. I mean, I got partners and business partners that are all deep into it and they're launching brands and doing all these things. And then you go into these mega, now these heavily invested into retail centers like MedMen. And they have these quote unquote experts on site.
Right.
And because people, if you don't have any other context or any other conversations with anybody else, then they're your guy, right? And and they say exactly what you said.
And so it's really hard because in the medical side of cannabis, we are by far outnumbered by everybody else in the world.
Sure.
So I mean, I'm part of a group called Society of Cannabis Clinicians. Mm-hmm. I'm the co-vice president for the organization, and we are national mostly, but we're also now international. So we have Canadian members, we have Australian members, awesome. And we have a few here and there throughout the world.
Okay.
So it's really amazing to see physicians and clinicians connecting on this one quote unquote medication. Mm-hmm. But because we are in such a dry spell, so to speak, in terms of what we can get very locally and very rationally, right? So it's really hard finding this in between or this happy medium.
That is such the right way to do it. I'm curious, do you guys have any members over in Europe? You guys working with any guys?
We have a few members in Europe. So our major shtick is really education, medical education.
Perfect.
So it's and that's kind of my personal shtick is medical education. Getting people to understand that this is a medication. Yeah. Listen. I have no issues clearly with the recreational use. It's just knowing what it is. Yeah. Like if you were going to go out and have a drink, you could tell me your drink of choice.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. In a
whiskey,
heartbeat.
Yeah.
Whiskey.
Yeah.
That's it. You'd have like one glass of whiskey and you know where you're going to be after that.
And
glass.
You've learned your limits.
Absolutely. Right.
Yep.
There's no question about it. Yeah. But no one's going out there and being like, on your first time having alcohol, let's have a pint of vodka. No one's saying that to you.
You know what? Let's see how much you can handle.
Right. Right. And if you're going to do it, you're going into it knowingly that you're going to vomit at the end of the night
100%.
Or you're going to have a horrible hangover.
My wife's going to carry me home.
Right.
God
you
bless her
know
soul.
that's going to happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But the problem with cannabis is that people don't know their limits. They don't even know where to start talking about their limits. Because the thing is most people will say the following. I take a quarter of a cookie. What does that even mean? What does that mean?
And the part that's even wild about this is that some of these cookies are baked up in people's house, right? Where they're assuming what the dosage is. It's not. They're getting a lot better for a lot of these. A lot of these do have some really clean manufacturing plants and facilities. I've been to one out of Denver that looks great, looks gorgeous.
Right.
But with that, some of these people are still, small business guys.
Right.
And there's this starting, hey, commercial kitchen, like they rent out on the weekend and kind of mix up their own thing. And it's not that well,
Right. Consistency.
Consistent. Yeah.
That's right.
It's not there.
So this past weekend I was in the ER and I had a young, lovely girl in her late 20s here from Texas with a bunch of her friends. And they've been using edibles all weekend. And she's like, well, I've been taking half of a jelly and then I felt like it didn't do anything for me. So today I took a whole one. I go, well, what was the milligram dosing? Yeah. Shrugged her shoulders and said, I don't know. That's where I think the conversation needs to start. Because just like alcohol and just like any other, unit of measurement, right? Anything else you take, you know that if you're on a diet or if you're eating habits, you have to be careful of what you're watching what you eat. You're not going to eat more than, one dessert a day, for example. Right. Okay. Or that you're not going to have more than, a slice of pie, right? Like if you ate a whole pie, that would be not such a great idea. Yeah. Right? if you're diabetic, that you shouldn't be eating pie. Yeah, right? So just to give you kind of comparisons, but we don't have that same sense with cannabis, and we don't have that same sense with kind of a lot of what's going on in the world. Even the vape pens, which I think in general are actually pretty good. The problem is they're not very well labeled. So you can pick up a friend's vape pen and have no idea what's inside. Right. Is this a 90% THC vape pen or is this a 25% vape pen? Is this a CBD vape or is this a hybrid? You don't know what's in it.
So do you feel like the conversation is getting better? I mean,
absolutely.
Okay.
But I'll tell you where it's getting better and where it's not getting better. It's getting better with the public. Yeah. It's not getting better in the medical arena.
Isn't that wild? I mean, because, all right, so let me I'm going to give you a little bit of my propaganda here, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, I've fallen in love with podcasting because it's the medium and only medium that, as a marketer and as someone that's trying to, spread my own interest here, it's the only medium where you can add some context to the conversation. Yes. I mean, videos as well, of course. I mean, all those are beautiful, but people are so busy, they don't have time to stop and watch a full 20-minute interview, let alone an hour-long deep dive, nuanced conversation, right?
Absolutely.
Into it. And a lot of us headline read. And, and so you hear that either whatever your, choice of media is, they'll have their spin on it about how they want it to kind of look and kind of frame the conversation for you. But I love the approach of being in the middle because a lot of things are normally, in the middle, very few things when you dive into it and you really understand the history and the background and where it's going and those little politics that kind of play into it. Like, do you just go hard left, or do you go hard right on anything, right? I mean, it's normally this split divide and it's like splitting hairs, but they matter. Right. And so when it comes to cannabis, the conversation needs some experts in there because it's a lot of guys who just experiment like that are great.
That are fine.
Yeah. Health coaches kind of getting out there, have some experience, kind of just trying on themselves. I do a lot of experiments on my own, not with cannabis, but with like other diets and, fad type of workouts and stuff going on like that. Sure. And that's great, but it's always nice to level it up with someone that's looking at the, hard data and the objective outcomes from it, right?
And I totally appreciate that because something you said, it really touches my heart, which is, we're so headline readers these days. We're so, we don't delve deep. And this is really a problem because we have to understand that very few times in life is it black or white. Yeah. It's so few. And so much gray. And I say this all the time. People, a lot of my medical colleagues, tease me a lot, when I talk about cannabis and they're like, oh, have any good smokes lately? And I'm like, you have to move past it. Like you got to move past it. I can't handle this anymore. And, every time I give a lecture, somebody in the crowd always says, oh, are you passing out free edibles? And it's always the same, always. And I'm always trying to say the same thing. It's like
the same lame joke over and over.
The same joke. I actually told my husband this last night. I go, I just don't know what to say anymore to the jokes. Yeah. I get it. I appreciate it. I still think it's funny. Yeah. But at some point you have to say, I saw a young woman here yesterday who's having 50 to 300 seizures a day, and it's really hard on her. And it's not just hard on her. It's hard on her family. Right. And it's hard on her younger brother. And it's, you know what? that's not something to joke about. And if we can provide her with something other than the 4 medications she's taking with the bad outcomes, with the bad side effects that she's getting from them, if we can provide something to minimize that and maybe potentially even resolve that, then why is that something to laugh about?
Right.
And why is that something to be, joking about? Great. Recreational, wonderful. Have that conversation. That's one side of it. But the biggest part to me about recreational coming out and being legal was actually that we could separate these two issues and separate them and say, hey, let's have a real conversation. You want to smoke? Great. You have a real medical issue? Great. Let's talk about that too. But let's separate them out.
Do you think that the fact that it's now recreational, that's hindered the progress of how people view it? No?
It's funny. I really wasn't sure the way this would all come about with recreational laws. So kind of rewinding for a second here, I started my practice basically the day recreational laws passed here in California. I said, that's it. I'm going to go and take a better look at what this thing is, because if this is winning by a popular vote, then maybe we need to take a deeper look into what this is.
Yeah.
And that was when I really decided to delve really deeply into this. So the benefit of recreational laws has actually been that it's made all of our laws around this better, and that people aren't just hiding this under the rug anymore, but they're really paying attention to it, and they're making better medication. They're making it more accessible to people who need it. And, the downside was that it made it much more expensive. The flip side, though, is that they're making a variety now. So whereas it used to be mostly just smokables and a couple edibles, there's so much. And I was showing this to you before the podcast started, but for the people out there, in my office, I like to stay very educational. And so what I have here in the office is boxes of what different cannabis products are available out on the market. And one of the things that always blows my patients away is the fact that we have such a large variety of oil tinctures. And most of my patients are actually taking oil tincture-based medications. So you have anywhere from 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 8-to-1, 18-to-1, 30-to-1, 1-to-3. And then you also have 1-to-1 in CBD THC. So there's varieties that I don't even have here, and there's more of them. But the fact that we can get this many ratio of CBD to THC medications is really quite phenomenal. And I have to thank the recreational market for doing this, because I don't think this would have been we would not have had as many available, and we would not have had access to this.
You know what? So do we mind geeking out a little bit and kind of talking about those different ratios and talk about the benefits? Because I think this is the conversation that when people go into like these shops, remember those, because I'm not from LA, so I've only been on for like 3 years. But when I used to come out here for work on a regular basis, Santa Monica, Venice Beach was loaded with those
Pot dogs.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
But now they're all evaporated.
Right.
Yeah.
75% of which went out of business like the day after legalization. Very quickly.
Those guys evaporated. I mean, by the time I got here, it was pretty much, I couldn't even find them for the most part anymore. So, and I'm not sure what was going on in there. I never really kind of went in there, but they just had the green tints and all the rest of it.
Yeah, it wasn't that. This was part of why I wanted to do this, because my sister-in-law had breast cancer.
Wow.
And she walked into one of these places and they barely looked at her and kind of do like some I called it hocus pocus medicine.
Sure.
And, filled out the right forms and completed the right things so that they could provide people with a medical marijuana card. But to me, that wasn't enough, because then you'd walk into a dispensary and then, depending on which dispensary you happen to walk into or who was on that day, like you mentioned, there's these bud tenders who are behind the counter who, number one, legally, they're not allowed to give you medical advice.
I was going to ask you, because there's no, is there a some of these guys have a certification, quote unquote, that they've developed in-house.
They're starting to come out. And we at SEC, Society of Cannabis Clinicians, have also talked about, whether or not that we want to kind of help that progress along. But it's a really challenging place to be in, because imagine, as a doctor, do you want to train somebody who you have no idea of who the background is, what their education is, about medication. Okay, so basically we want to train you to be a pharmacist.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that's what it is.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, are we going to say, well, you have to ask about their medications that they're on? Are you going to ask about their narcotics or their benzos or the other sedatives that they're taking? Are you not going to ask about that? Like, where's this line drawn? And you know what? Are there any people doing this? Are they doing it right? Do they mean anything? Do they have any validity? Is there anybody validating these things on a higher level?
That's a great point.
And there's not. And that to me is the rub with all of this. And that's to me where I think we can do better. So I'm gonna give 2 other plugs here.
Please.
So I did open up my own medical office here in Santa Monica.
And we're going to talk about it too. Yeah, yeah.
It's called the Relief Institute. I am where I do cannabis-based medicine all day long, every day when I'm not in the ER. So the advantage, I think, of being able to provide people with good medical advice is for people who aren't using recreationally. I tell people who are using recreationally, just go smoke. Try and avoid edibles. Edibles, I say, are for professional users. Don't go above, 2 to 5 milligrams of THC in an edible is more than enough for the majority of people.
And that's where they start, though.
That's where that's the problem.
Yeah, right.
I think that there's a lot of overkill in this industry, and you don't need to overkill all the time. Like, you don't need to be taking shots of vodka every night. Sometimes people just need like half a glass of wine, and for like half a glass of wine, you just need like a milligram or 2 of THC.
This is a really interesting part of the conversation, because this is where the American culture, bigger, faster, stronger, all that kind of plays into it. We gotta have the fastest car, and that's the best way to go.
Oh yeah.
Even though if you're not going anywhere,
that's exactly right.
You're in LA traffic. You're not going to. You're not going fast.
Anywhere in LA traffic. That's right.
But that's where I think this is kind of one of those reframing this conversation to say, hey, walk your way into this.
That's right.
There's no reason to get out of your chair and do a full-on sprint.
Yeah, because you're not going to be able to, because you will fall.
Or you
will break
ACL.
something. You will tear your will tear your ACL or your Achilles. You'll tear something and not be able to recover for a couple, for 24 hours.
Sure.
Right? So instead of doing that, right, you're absolutely right, is reframing this discussion and saying you just need to go a little slower. And if you want to kind of knock it out of the park, go with a smokable. Go with something you inhale. Don't go with something that you ingest, because the biggest issue I see is people are waiting 2 hours and it just doesn't hit them. And so they feel like, well, it didn't hit them, so it didn't really work. So then they take more.
Classic mistake.
Exactly. Classic mistake. That's exactly right.
How many cases do you see of that in the ER on a regular basis?
Oh, I laughed one night when I saw a rock star who is to be unnamed, who is a very heavy cannabis endorser.
Sure.
And he had totally overdosed on a cannabis edible. And I was like,
you even know better.
Even you should know better. And the problem is, time and time again, is knowing your dose.
Yep.
And most people don't know their dose. So I ask people so one of the things I teach in the office is how to read a label, what the labels actually mean. I see a lot of patients now. Most of my patients are over 50 to 60. Mm-hmm. I see a subset of patients that are under that, but the overwhelming majority of my patients are older, and they're on multiple medications. And so what I say is would you ever take a pill that you didn't know the dosage? No, there's no way they would take a pill. Even if it was a blood pressure, if it was something they didn't think much of, they still would never take a pill without knowing the dose. Cannabis is no different. You need to know your dose. And you need to know your dose of what. Yeah. And because, what we talked about earlier was this mix of CBD and THC, a lot of people are being like, oh, this is a CBD medicine, just take it, right? Because CBD is benign in everyone's eyes. But what they're not realizing, and when they show up to my office, they show me their medications, and it's actually a mix. And it's a 1-to-1 mix, which is a 50-50 ratio of CBD to THC. Okay. Or it's a 4-to-1 mix, or it's the flip. It's actually a THC dominant, so it's 3 parts THC to 1 part CBD.
Gotcha.
So
it's always with the actual CBD first,
no,
and then
it's not.
Oh, so see, thank you, because I'm looking here, so it's THC.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So one of my biggest gripes with the industry is let's all standardize the conversation.
100%.
So at least you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Put CBD first in ratio tinctures, and put THC second, or flip it. But just keep it consistent.
Oh, so they even flip it on the labeling?
Sometimes they flip it on the labeling.
Oh, my goodness.
Everyone labels things the way they want.
Sure.
Because this is the other part about regulations. This is the one thing they haven't started tapping into. and hopefully they will after this. They hear our conversation and
right.
podcast.
We'll get it out. We'll get it out there.
Is getting consistency with the labeling so that no matter what product you buy or what designer you buy or whatever we're calling these companies, you're always getting the same ratio, CBD first, THC second.
Yeah.
Right. And so now when people are like, CBD is great for sleep, sometimes people can be like, oh, I'm taking CBD and it's great for my sleep. And it's actually a high ratio THC to CBD. So there is CBD in there, but it's actually and THC.
But what's kind of funny too, and tell me if I'm off course here, but you can still feel CBD working though. Like it's a very lightness that I felt before, and kind of a So, I just didn't want to work. I remember someone gave me one. And I'm like, okay, sure, CBD. It's like a little chocolate. I didn't check the amount that was in there.
Right.
Totally clueless because it's one guy got it from the manufacturer, so it didn't have labels on the box yet. And I'm like, great. So we're having this, and it's right down the street here. We were at Misfit Restaurant. He was like, hey, try this out. I'm like, all right, great. And we were supposed to do work. The very next step was to go to a coffee shop and work. And I remember looking at him and said, I don't feel like working right now.
And so I would
didn't
have
feel
to
high.
bet there was a little bit of THC.
I would imagine.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, and this, and people might not like this because it's not a popular idea or perspective, but CBD is not a vitamin.
Yeah.
It is not a vitamin.
Yeah.
If I tell people,
can you overdose on it?
We have not seen people coming into the emergency department with overdoses.
Sure.
But that being said, the big research studies out right now, there's a lot coming through in terms of CBD only because they're pushing a new pharmaceutical medication called Epidalex.
Interesting.
And this is kind of, it just got FDA approval and DEA rescheduling so that physicians can write for this for aggressive seizure syndromes. And listen, I think all parts of cannabis and every part of this, be it pharmaceutical, be it lay people, be it, communities, whoever is pushing this momentum forward, I think we're all moving towards the same goal. So people were like, damn, sorry, I don't know if I
No, you're good. You're good.
Pharmaceutical companies are coming into this. They're also pushing the same goal. They're pushing it through a different avenue that lay people cannot, unfortunately, it's hard to penetrate.
Yeah.
And most of the population has been doing a good job because it has legalized in so many different avenues. And so that I credit the regular people for. I credit the community, the cannabis community for doing that. But there is a place for pharmaceuticals, and their place is coming. And it's going to mix things up a little bit. And so what Epidalex did was they did a recent study with CBD out of New York with Dr. Yasmin Hurd. She's great. You should keep her name in your back pocket.
Where's she located? Is she in LA?
She's in Mount Sinai in New
cool.
York. So she did some recent research on the use of CBD for heroin withdrawal. And she gave 400 milligram doses. Huge. It's
extremely high, yeah.
I see your eyebrows raising over there. So huge. It's a huge dose. And for the most part, for the people out there listening, 400 milligrams of CBD is, for some oil tinctures, the entire bottle of the tincture. Right? So there are some tinctures that come in 300 and 400 milligrams in a whole bottle. So that dosage, not for nothing, is a big dose.
It's huge.
But what she found was that she could decrease cravings and anxiety in patients who are going through active withdrawal.
Wow.
So that's where I see the wave of the future for cannabis. Excuse me. And, CBD-based medications, not just for anxiety and depression and pain and seizure modification, but also in terms of what's going to help crack this opiate epidemic that we're in.
Yeah, because we're definitely in one.
Oh yeah.
And this is, it's funny that, I remember coming up and watching all the Dare, this is your brain.
We're in the same age range.
Right. They got the little fried egg, and they scared the crap out of us kids. Yeah. I mean, and then all it took was a little bit of exposure to anything that was going on. You're like, nah, I don't want any piece of that.
Yeah.
Never. And now, fast forward 1 or 2 decades, maybe 3, depending on how much you want to dive into this. But I mean, now we're at a place where the people have led this upsurge of what they want. And I think it was really cool that you got in right when it got legalized for recreational, because if you think about the whole drug company model, right, it really is patient driven. Like
Right.
a lot of times they kind of put the ads out on TV and they drive the patients to their doctors and say, hey, I think I have a bump on my face. I need whatever that hardcore drug is.
Right. That's right. That's right.
Right. And so from a marketing standpoint, it's the best way because you trying to push the boulder uphill by yourself is a beast. And so it's great not to exclude the people and exclude certain groups even because everybody has to have their say. It's just trying to get everybody to speak the same language, I think is the toughest part of the conversation.
That's right. So what I'm trying to do to this end is bring everyone together, kind of the meeting of the minds, so to speak, in a conference this fall. So October 5th, I am hosting a medical conference that's designed for healthcare practitioners, chiropractors, acupuncturists, physical therapists, rehab specialists, physicians, NPs, PAs, anybody out there who, I see a lot of people selling CBD out of their office space.
There's a lot of them. I even see pharmacies selling CBD out of their office space, and they have no clue what they're selling. Yep. I chided a pharmacist the other day. I said, would you sell any pill out of your office without knowing the dosage? She said, no. And I said, well, then why do you feel comfortable selling CBD out of your office? What was her response? I'm curious. Her jaw kind of dropped, and she was like, I never really thought about it that way. It's just a cream. I said, but you even sell lidocaine cream. You still know how much is in there. Yeah. You know exactly what's in there. So why is it that this is any different? And it was because there's no knowledge. Not that there's no knowledge. It's that there's no one promoting that education. Because in regular medical kind of environments, we're used to having pharmaceutical companies push new medication knowledge. Not knowledge in general, but new medication knowledge. And that's the gap here. And the other gap comes in that, the Medical Board of California, did you know the Medical Board of California has rules and guidelines for cannabis recommendation for physicians? No. Yeah. So they're going to be at the conference. It's awesome. They're going to be talking about their perspective on cannabis and physicians' recommendation of cannabis. Okay. The LA County of Public Health is going to be there. The Cannabis and Cannabinoid Research Journal out of UC Irvine is going to be distributing their research journals. The Society of Cannabis Clinicians is going to be there talking to people about having education. Like I said, they do quarterly educational meetings where they pick a topic and they discuss that topic at length and how it relates to cannabis. So I did the last lecture for them in June, which was on narcotic reduction with the use of cannabis. So that's my favorite thing in the world to do. If I could do nothing else in the world but take people off their pills and their fentanyl patches using cannabis only, I would do it in a heartbeat. I would imagine that has to be a growing space because people are... Oh, it's not? It's not? Not yet. Not really? Yet. Okay. We're going to push it. And you know what? It is going to be because the pharmaceutical companies are getting behind it. I was about to say, are they throwing research dollars towards it? They are starting to because they are seeing what Yasmin Hurd published. They are seeing what, we've got a couple other people here in California publishing. The problem is that people are publishing kind of about it, but not directly in it. And so that's where, we saw this big article in JAMA a few years ago about how Medicare dollars in states with legalized recreational cannabis use plummeted in terms of their narcotic usage. So the revenues went up too. Right. And so it's kind of like, you're seeing the trends. And so now it's time to kind of put the burden of proof on it. Right. So we now have to prove that that's actually going on. So to that end, I've actually invited two pharmaceutical companies, Canopy Health from Canada. Yeah. Seth Canopy's Rogen. Huge. Seth Rogen and Martha Stewart are now, I think two of the public faces of Canopy Health. They're coming hopefully to the conference as well as GW Pharmaceuticals with Epidalex. So and I've invited a couple of the local dispensaries to actually host a physician. So I want them to start getting involved in physician education, right? Yeah. Let's get the conversation moving forward. And the only way we're going to be able to do this is by having these types of conferences. So this is really the first of its kind to be able to have all of these people in discussion together about not what is cannabis, but how can you implement that in your practice? What are you looking for? When you're reading labels, what are you looking to read? What does that mean? What are the common dosages we're seeing? What are the common ratio medications that we're seeing being used for these different, problems? Multiple sclerosis is a very good indication for 1-to-1 ratio medications. Yeah. That's the one that's been studied in Europe.
like we talked about with seizures, very severe forms of seizures, we're seeing CBD, CBD onlys being a good indication for use because it tends to decrease the number of seizures you're having a day. And the other flip side is then you can also decrease your other seizure medications, because that's the second part of that headline that we never talk about is what about your other medications?
Right.
So,
which is major because yeah, a lot of times people just kind of mix it, assuming
and add it on, and then they're like, well, I don't feel very well anymore. I'm like, well, that's because you've basically doubled down on your dosages of everything, right? So you can't be taking, you can, but I wouldn't recommend it. You can't be taking your narcotic pill after having your hip replaced and doubling down on this at the same time and not expect to be drowsy.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So the goal of this to me is to be able to kind of take off some of the other medications, not to add on, but to supplement, right? To kind of remove one versus the other. But that's something you have to do with a doctor.
What you're doing,
I don't want people to do on their own.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. And, so this whole conference that you're working on, and do you have a whole team with you, I'm assuming?
I have a whole team. We've got 2 physicians, one lawyer who does medical cannabis legal work.
That's great.
And so he's going to be answering questions. He's going to be doing a panel set of question and answers for clinicians. What can I send out of my office? What can't I send out of my office? What can I be recommending legally? What can't I be recommending? All these little nuances that a lot of clinicians get really scared about. And the good news is that for the most part, you can do a lot. You can do a lot. The problem becomes is the nuances, right?
Yeah.
So making sure that you're not going to get in trouble, making sure that you're not making claims, making sure that you're following good medical practices. At the end of the day, it's about good medical practices and about good health practices.
So legally, who can technically sell cannabis under their medical license or medical cannabis? Is it only MDs?
Sell any medical cannabis.
Got it.
Period. So they're in California, very isolated to California because other states are different. In California, there's no physicians cannot be involved in the sale of cannabis.
Interesting. Okay.
But in Florida, for example, I believe there is a seed to sale process that a physician has to oversee or be involved in. So
I think that's the case in like Arizona as well.
Right.
If I'm
so
correct,
all these and that's part of the problem is that in all these states, it's very different. And we need to get the states to all get in line together. Right?
Yeah.
And that's part of the, the benefit of getting it federally legalized, that we can all start having the same rules. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't all be talking regardless, or that we shouldn't have a body, a group, an organization that helps provide these states with, good practice, right? Like this is what we're seeing in California and Colorado and Arizona, in Florida. These are the good practice laws that you should take on and move forward to your next set. I
mean, and if you don't mind me just being my sales and marketing, I just got thrown in the hat because I'm really big into the conferences because I think that's a great way to talk about spreading the right information around healthcare.
Right.
And it's not even so much that you got to have best speakers and everything else, but it's the ecosystem that I see that happens around there. And because maybe I could be totally wrong with this, but I feel like because, we're talking about a plant. And there's not a lot of variables that there's only but so many variables that we can mix the plant in and really work with.
Right.
Which I know there's a lot of the pieces besides just the THC and like CBD.
Right.
And there's a lot of other chains there, right?
Major cannabinoids.
Talk about it, yeah.
The minor cannabinoids.
Yeah.
And then we get into the terpenes. And, there's a company called, I think they're called D2 Terpenes in the Valley right now that makes just the terpenes that they can then add back into products.
Wow.
Right. So that's another exciting kind of venue with this. But you're right. So
I was going to say that ecosystem and getting those brands to come to talk about labeling process. Right. And see who's dominating from the labeling process, because it's going to come down to, in my eyes, the person that can do the best job with marketing and branding the product that's going to grab the general public's eye to say, hey, doc, is this okay? I take this with the rest of my medication mix, right?
Right.
And whoever's going to poke out on the shelves, right, the best.
Right.
Because I've even seen over the past couple of years, like the guys who had the brown bag cookies or whatever they had in the front of the register. I mean, it's evolved to this beautiful packaging, right? And
I mean, the packaging. There's so
it's
much
getting
craze
wild
over the packaging, and I'm always like, I get a little flustered because my patients are older and they can never open the packaging. So I sit and actually work with them sometimes on just how to open packaging.
Sure,
before they
and all the safety labels, all the safety.
Yeah, I mean the
protocols they have on it, right?
And I'll show you, but it's really hard sometimes to even read the labels. This one's a little bit better. So, some of them get really hard. They just write CBD on there. So, for example, this is like when you pick this up, you think all you're getting is CBD.
Yes, but it's 4:1 ratio.
It's not. It's a 4-to-1 ratio.
Yeah.
And it's actually, this one packs a really big punch. So it's a little bit hard. Where the industry has started steering away from words like indica and sativa. But
have they?
Still, it's not as in terms of edibles.
Sure.
So flowers, yes. Yeah. Flowers still indica, sativa. But, understanding that, what makes indica and what makes sativa, we don't have those really chemical or really specific labeling reasons right now. And it's hard because the industry doesn't get, I see some of them get doctors involved and I'm like, this doctor doesn't even work with cannabis. They don't even know what any of this means. Like, you can't just pick an MD out of a hat. Like you kind of need somebody who understands, the minutia of this to get involved. Otherwise, it's all just smoke and mirrors, which is what we're trying to avoid now.
I really hope that people show up for this conference because I can just see this bubbling into something that people need to attend if they're going to be in the space. Yes. I'm not in the space, but like I said, I have friends in there and I see what they're up to and I'm like, man, this is like some cowboy stuff. You get it where people making
and
the labels.
It shouldn't be anymore because we know enough that it really shouldn't be. And so, the reason I kind of designed this conference was to have, experts in the field, to have everyone at the top level of this game to be involved and have those really open discussions. Are we going to be training, bud tenders? Are we not going to be training bud tenders?
Right.
Are we going to, what is the studies behind CBD? What are the studies behind THC? Where can I, recommend this for my patients? Where should I even be going to recommend this? How am I trusting that one place is licensed versus another versus medications that are licensed? How can I go that extra mile for my patients? Or even if the pharmacy wants to start selling CBD out of their offices, which I was telling this to you earlier, we now have CBD products like Sagely. Cream is now being sold at Bed Bath & Beyond. And
which is excellent packaging. Those guys did a great job with the branding. They've
done a really amazing job. It's a really nicely packaged product. Mm-hmm. And a really good one too. So they're now being sold at Bed Bath & Beyond and at Neiman Marcus. And so, when I always say, I'm like, when it gets to those levels, like, why is it that the clinician is the last to know or the last to be able to, pick up this package and say, I even know what that means. Yeah. Right? I know what the 50 milligrams of CBD in this roll-on is for a headache. And I can tell you, this is a really good product for your headache. Try it topically over your forehead, rub it down, give it about 15 to 20 minutes. If you're going to respond to it, usually respond in about 20 minutes. If you're not going to respond to it, then you're not going to.
Can we talk about microdosing a little bit?
Yes. So this is something that is kind of a difficult conversation. And the reason is because micro really should mean less than 1 milligram.
Okay.
Right? Like a
scientific term.
Right?
Sure.
A very scientific kind of basis. And that was the idea behind, I think, a lot of these products when they first started. But then you get into, less than 1 milligram if you use every day is not going to get you very far. If you use even a few times a week, again, it's not going to get you very far. It will get you very far if you use like once a week, maybe twice a week.
Sure.
Kind of like keeping your alcohol tolerance down. You know, you do build a little bit of a tolerance to this, and it's something that people don't like to talk about in the cannabis industry. You sensitize to this. That's our technical term. You sensitize to this, and then you will require a little bit more. The nice part is that you don't build a tolerance in the same way you do to narcotics, where you have to continually build and build and build and build.
Can you kind of cycle off with that tolerance?
You can. That's a great question, actually. So about 3 to 5 days off, and you do find that you need less again. Kind of.
Okay.
You refresh, and it's called like a cannabis holiday. You go on cannabis holiday, and you can get that kind of resensitization, or you get that benefit of going to a lower dose again.
Gotcha.
And so the question becomes like, why are you even talking about microdosing? Just because it's a fun word to use? Like, it just like, I'm like, why are people even like so fascinated with this?
Yeah.
And I think it's part of like this whole idea of like, now like ketamine's hit the market, right, in the pharmaceutical world. Like, we now use IV ketamine in clinics for severe depression. Wow. I don't like it. I will be very honest with you. I don't think it's a great way to go, and I'll tell you exactly why.
Please.
I treated a young guy with heroin abuse, and he was doing really well for about 3 to 6 months, was using cannabis oils and edibles only. So I try and stay away from smokables because you get the same high. And the whole point of rehab to me, and the whole point of getting off drugs, is to avoid the high, right? Like, get your highs from your natural endorphins, get your high from running, get your high from having sex, get your high from being in a relation. Like, get your highs in other ways. Don't get your highs from medication. But the idea to me of cannabis with abuse is, or with people who have abused in the past, is to actually get them to be level and to get them to not be anxious all the time, to be able to get them to sleep at night when they need to go to sleep, to be able to kind of have balance in their day, which is what a lot of these addiction kids are missing, right? They're missing balance.
Yeah.
So to go back, he started using ketamine, not really through my recommendation, but through another physician's recommendation. And then he loved it. He loved how he felt when he went and did ketamine for 3 days in the clinic.
Because he's up there. Yeah.
Because he's up there again, right?
Yeah.
And so what I ended up finding out was, a few months later, he started scoring ketamine on the streets and giving himself injections because he thought that it's the same thing. And that's what I'm trying to avoid. And that's why I get really frustrated when people are, soliciting, oh, now we have this new treatment with ketamine. It's that whole thing. It's not the headline, right? It's, you got to get deeper and you got to dig deeper, and you can't be offering that to kids who have addiction histories. It cannot be okay. So ketamine's one of them. There's mushrooms and the psilocybins. I was
about to say, yeah.
Those are
the
now,
mushrooms,
now
DMT
up in the, it's now all, it's legalized now in Colorado.
Yeah,
Denver,
exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And now it's kind of, people in California are all about it, and the microdosing of psilocybins. And all I keep thinking is, what do you want to get away from?
Yeah.
Like, what are you guys all trying to get away from in your life that requires this much escape?
Yeah.
That's always my question is, why are you using?
I love that because, now you're talking about the source of the issue. And that's unfortunately what a lot of insurance companies don't allow you to bill for or allow us to kind of really work on, right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, put a Band-Aid on it, keep it moving on, and now you're back good, you're great. 3 days out, and they're like, yeah, I feel great. And then they're, 3 months later, they're back in a very similar rut.
Even insurance companies do, like, this is another thing I realized very recently, was insurance companies don't pay for physical therapy year round.
I know.
I mean, what?
It's crazy.
Like, so I have really debilitated patients who have to kind of pick and choose when they get physical therapy. I mean, that's ridiculous. So it's like you're willing to pay for narcotics, and you're willing to pay for IV treatment, and you're willing to pay for all this other nonsense, right? It's not nonsense, I shouldn't say that, but
sure,
all this other kind of Band-Aids.
Yeah.
But you're not willing to pay for the work, right? And physical therapy to me, or mental health therapy to me, is the work.
Yeah.
The work of getting better. And it doesn't all have to be talking. It doesn't all have to be walking, but you got to do some of it. Otherwise, you fall back into that trap.
Where do you see this going as far as the clinics, as far as the insurance, and as far as people trying to, because I feel like there's a need from the people, like, hey, I know that there's more out there. I know I should be doing more of this, just getting better quality sleep and just working on the healthy habit type process, the more the long game, lots of that hard work type stuff, but that's how you fix the foundation.
Right.
Do you feel like insurance companies are starting to measure a little bit more of that? Because you hear that in some of the conversation, now they're trying to, groups like Kaiser are trying to have this all in-house so they can track and see the whole lifespan of the patient and see what the overall costs are. Places like Amazon are taking it all in-house so they can just kind of calculate exactly how much they're spending versus what they could save if they try to get this actual jump on it.
Right.
Are you seeing any of that on your space?
I think we're still about 2 years away from even talking about insurance coverage because of federal rules.
Of
Because insurances mostly are not local, local entities. They're mostly federally based. They're not inclusive of it. The thing about it, and this is, I used to really want insurance to cover this.
Yeah.
The thing about it becomes twofold. Number one, do I really think they're going to make it cheaper?
No.
Yeah. Right. So my husband picked up antacid medication the other day, and he got a prescription, went to a pharmacy, got it filled, and he came home and he showed it to me, like whatever, Protonics or something. Yeah. And I was like, did you check and see if it was cheaper behind, like just on the regular market shelves? Because this is the exact same thing as they have on the regular market shelves. He's like, no, I figured it was cheaper because it was under insurance. And no, it was not. It was $10 more expensive with insurance to go through the pharmacist. And I just kind of stood there and I said, this is the problem with insurance. So until insurance in and of itself gets fixed, to take a medication that I give to people for sleep, which is usually like, let's say, for example, a chocolate THC edible, a $20 or $25 chocolate bar will last most people a month. Yeah. So is that going to get cheaper with insurance? No, your insurance rate is going to go up and it's going to be more expensive in the long term to get it covered. So it becomes this really like, you have to go back to the economics of it. Like, is it worth it to go through insurance or is it not worth it to go through insurance? The only caveat is that I think that what I do should go through insurance. Yeah. I think that the medical practice of it should absolutely go through insurance because you want to have people be able to have long-term follow-up with this and to be able to adjust their medications on a long-term basis. Most people don't want to keep coming back on a long-term basis because they're like, I just picked it up from the dispensary anyways. What do I need you for? Got it. But it's forgetting that, your body evolves, right? We're not this. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago.
Thank goodness. Me and you both.
Your body evolves and your medications evolve and your situation evolves and, you lose loved ones. You have gains and losses in life. You have happy moments and sad moments in life. And so this to me is really also a very situational medication. So to be able to, and that's part of why I'm hosting this conference is to get regular doctors to kind of be able to understand what I do, not so they refer patients to me, but so they can have that conversation with their patients.
At least get the education.
Yeah. Yeah. And if they can have that conversation one-on-one with their patients, then you know what? It's better for physician-patient interaction, and you feel more comfortable with your doctor. You're more likely to seek your doctor's care when something does go wrong. You're more likely to get better medical care because your doctor is responsive to you and not blowing you off as a pot user. Okay. I mean, because that's what ends up happening. Right? Yeah. And I read this all the time. I'm part of a lot of different Facebook groups and you read this all the time where the patient, somebody, for example, with ulcerative colitis. I heard one of your podcasts earlier with, a guy with ulcerative colitis, doctor. I'm going to blank on his name. And he talked about how he had he had classic, I could tell, like even before he said he had UC, I could tell he had a UC flare right before he kind of finally broke down and admitted that he had an issue and had to go to the hospital. Right. And the problem is that he was so afraid to admit it. And he was so afraid to seek help because he thought it meant he was weak. And then having somebody respond to you on the other end with anything other than kindness and understanding, physicians get frustrated. Physicians get frustrated that you don't show up earlier, right? Mm-hmm. You're bleeding and having blood and mucus in your stool 10 to 20 times a day. Why didn't you come in sooner? And part of it is that that relationship isn't there anymore. Who's your family doc? Can you tell me?
No, I can't.
That's right. You can't. Listen, and that's okay. But that's okay because the
I have a face.
The way of the world has now become. Yeah. You go to Google MD first. That's fine.
Google MD, yeah.
That's fine. It's accepting that exists.
True. You have to.
And moving forward from that. Because if you get stuck on that, you're never going to go anywhere.
So you know what I mean. I really want to dive into what you're doing at your clinic too, because I think what you're saying is strong, and the fact that not knowing that where to search on Google because we already know you can play with those analytics. You can push yourself up to the top, and some of the best content's on page 5. But who's going to go to page 5?
Right,
right.
That's exactly right.
And most guys don't even go to PubMed and really try to read the actual research and understand what's out. So talk about your clinic because obviously, it sounds like insurance is not covering for it.
Correct.
Right. So people have to kind of do their homework and find out who's who in the industry.
Good question. So I mentioned earlier, so I run an office out of Santa Monica. It's a regular medical office. There's nothing exciting about this office. Like, people are always like, can I come to your office? I'm like, sure. It's got like 4 walls and a window. I mean,
it's a beautiful view though.
It's got a beautiful view.
The view's serious. Yeah.
All the way down to downtown LA, and on a clear day you can see the Hollywood sign.
Oh, nice.
But that being said, sorry, I'm going to backtrack here. So my office does only medical cannabis. Okay, so if you see me in the ER, I talk about everything but cannabis. If you see me in the office, I only talk about cannabis and how to reduce medications or how to add this in to get you better outcomes. Okay,
is that a battle a little bit for you because like in the ER, you're like, you probably see so many things where you're like, CBD might be okay here, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
and it's really hard because I'm not necessarily sanctioned to do that type of thing. So yeah, it's a really hard split. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem, as I mentioned earlier, is how many physicians are doing this. Okay, so we get a lot of healthcare like coaches that are doing this, but to find a clinician who's doing this is a little bit more of a challenge.
Yep.
My colleague, Dr. Alan Frankel at Greenbridge Medical, he's here in Santa Monica as well. He also does medical cannabis use. Mm-hmm. He's been in practice, to his credit, about a decade, and he really was one of the forefathers of bringing medical cannabis to light.
Wow! So
kudos to him for all that he's done over the years. My favorite colleague and mentor in the cannabis space has actually been Dr. Bonnie Goldstein. She does pediatric cannabis medicine, which is a huge subfield of cannabis and pediatrics. And she's really pushed a lot of the work along and the research and the hard data about, cannabis is beneficial in pediatric autism, pediatric ADHD, seizures, mitochondrial disorders. I mean, we're seeing so much.
It's remarkable in like seizures. I've seen it firsthand just from my cousin who's much younger, but she's suffered with seizures. As soon as she started doing the treatments for herself, I mean, they haven't had an episode in almost over a year.
Yeah.
So and it was a pretty regular occurrence.
I mean, and this is something that Dr. Goldstein has been doing this for, again, over a decade.
Wow.
She's really good at what she does. But she's really highly sought after too. So she's got about a 3-month wait list these days.
Really?
So
it's good.
So no, it's just great. And
beautiful.
all it means to me is that how important this conversation is.
There's demand.
There's demand, and rightfully so, because there's not enough discussion about it. Now, beyond us three here in like the greater Los Angeles area, there's not really a whole lot more.
Which is wild.
That being said,
yeah.
UCLA came out with their own cannabis initiative I think they just celebrated their 2-year anniversary.
Good.
So they are having the discussion, and they brought Dr. Ziva Cooper on board. She's a PhD from New York to do the lab data, to do the hard work, the microbiology data at UCLA. So they've created, I think, about 40 staff members who are doing cannabis-related research. So the research is coming out. Then if you go down a little bit further south, UC San Diego has the longest-standing cannabis research group called CMCR, Cannabis Clinical Medical Cannabinoid Research, or I think that's what it is.
CMCR.
CMCR. And they just got a number of grants. I think they got a $2 million grant to host more medical cannabis research. So they are pushing forward on that end, which is so great. And it's so nice to see that they are pushing forward. They've really been kind of walking the line as well in terms of, pros, cons, having to be able to provide for the medical community for a long time. So those are, in terms of cannabis physician, there's not a lot of us, but if the beauty of being able to come into the office is that this isn't for most people, this is not a long-term commitment. I say to most people it's about 4 to 6 appointments.
Okay.
So that way you get your initial education. We start you on a medication if it's indicated for you. I have had to say this is not appropriate for some patients.
Good.
I've actually had to take some patients off cannabis entirely.
Really?
There is such a thing as cannabis addiction.
Yeah.
And so much so that
glad you
there
mentioned
is
that.
Cannabis Addiction Anonymous out there. You can send people to, it's called Marijuana Anonymous actually. So MA, there are MA programs out there. Addiction, like with anything, there is a potential for addiction, especially when there is a sense of euphoria involved in it. And so we see that becoming problematic when it interferes in your social life. When I had one patient who was on the brink of divorce because of his pot use.
Wow.
And that is where it's a problem, right? If it's becoming a problem where you come home, smoke, and you start watching porn in front of your 13-year-old daughter because you're not cognizant of what's going on, that's a problem. And that needs to be addressed. And he's lost, about 20 pounds, not because cannabis causes you to gain weight, but because most people who are smoking in that sense, who are using it to just decompress every afternoon regardless, they're not getting up and moving.
True.
And so just the movement and getting up is really what we're seeing in terms of weight loss. For some of my patients, I see a huge weight loss because they're no longer on narcotics and they're moving because they're not having pain and they're able to move now. So I know a lot of people in the cannabis industry like to talk about, this is like the next, Hail Mary, CBD is like the next Hail Mary for weight loss. Yeah. It's not, but it's about getting you moving, right? And it's about getting you up. And when you're in pain, you're not moving and you're not getting up. You're in bed, you're lying down for hours on end. So it's that part of the conversation.
I really love that, though. I'm glad you brought up the part about people getting hooked on the cannabis, because that's a piece of it that I think with all the hopes, which is great, that kind of got shuffled towards the back of the cards,
right,
about some of the things that do happen on the flip side of it, right?
Right.
So me coming into your clinic, if I was like, I'm struggling with X, it's about a 4 to 5 conversations visits that we have together.
So I see. Let's say I have a lot of intractable insomnia patients.
Sure.
So people always get sent here when they've tried everything and then it doesn't work, and then they get sent to me, which is really hard. I wish I got like the easy stuff, like I can't sleep for the first time.
Yeah.
I haven't started Ambien and I haven't been addicted to Ambien.
Like Ambien is no good anymore. Yeah.
But I see a lot of insomnia patients.
Yeah.
So those tend to be a little bit more challenging because I have to take them off their Ambien and supplement with I use THC base for that. So I'll supplement with a THC product instead as we're weaning off the Ambien, because lo and behold, Ambien, Lunesta's, what's the other? I can't think of the third one off the top of my head. Ambien and Lunesta all have these dependency-inducing qualities, and you do withdraw from them, especially if you've been on them for over 5 to 10 years, which a lot of my patients have.
Right.
And they just, I used to have a problem with insomnia, but I don't anymore because now I take Ambien every night, but then the Ambien stops working. And then they have this thing where they're like, I wake up after 4 hours on Ambien, so I have to take another one. And you're like, that's not the way it's supposed to work. So those patients are challenging and need a little bit more. But like, let me tell you, like normal pain patients, patients who don't use a lot of pain medications, but they're looking to help with their arthritis. They're looking to help with their low back pain. Those
I bet you get a lot of arthritic patients here.
A lot of
because I've heard great things about that as well.
Yeah, a lot of arthritis patients, a lot of insomnia, a lot of cancer patients, especially now with the internet promoting, a lot of people are like, cannabis cured my cancer. And, you read through these YouTube testimonials, or you listen to them, and you read through some of the research projects, and what you're seeing is it's cannabis with chemo 9 times out of 10.
Okay.
It's almost always cannabis and chemo saved my life.
Back in as if nothing happened.
No problem.
but so do you ever see like clinics popping up, like a franchise of your clinic that could be put in all the states that are recreational, or at least
not yet. We should. We'll talk afterwards. No,
seriously?
Yeah. No, we haven't as of yet.
Yeah.
But we are seeing small organizations kind of take it on head on. And part of it is because, imagine if you had built a clinic from scratch and now there's a new medication out, how interested would you be in changing all of that up and changing all of your training, so to speak,
Right.
So the question becomes, why would somebody do that, right? Why would somebody take their neurology practice and, change it to include all of this? This is Ariella, by the way.
Hey, Ariel. Nice to meet you. I'm Joe.
So we were printing up some of the flyers for the conference so you could have it.
Oh, awesome. So, you know what, just talking about the conference, too, I'm totally going to spread this out with my network. I got a nice list of docs on the West Coast. I manage everything west of Colorado.
Oh, great.
And about 10,000 different private practice guys. So I'll definitely spread the word through email blasting. And if you're ever into podcasting, which I hope that you do pick up more of the mic and really get involved in other people's shows as well. I mean, I just think this is such a great conversation for most people to have.
Yeah, this is great what you're doing.
Well, this is fun. I mean, talking about different therapies out there and pretty much educating the market about newer devices or therapies and technology that has been explored in other countries, especially because my company that I work full time for is over in Germany, and so their healthcare system's totally different.
Totally different.
Pluses and minuses to it. It's not.
Right.
It's not a perfect system, but it's totally different. How they get government funding to experiment with a lot of different technologies has advanced how they look at doing a lot of different therapies, right? So, and we don't have that case there, but there's some other pluses that we have here, which is the whole free market, right? So we're letting it kind of bubble up from the ground up.
That's right.
And then, companies will chase down where the money's coming.
That's right. And so it's funny because the advantage of the free market has always been, I always tease my patients because I say, if we're going to use a chocolate edible, for example, the advantage of having this be really ground up has been that you can pick like 20 different chocolate varieties.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really nice to be able to take your medicine as a little piece of chocolate at night. It's great. Why not? Or to be able to take it as a gummy bear, not bear because it's no longer legal as a bear, but which is a good thing.
That is good. I didn't even I
had a hard time telling people to decapitate a gummy bear as part of their dose. So it's much easier to take half a square of a gummy. But I mean, to be able to have that much leeway in your medication is really, really phenomenal. Another thing that we've seen kind of pop up infrequently, in my opinion, but has been things like sugar-free chocolate. So for my diabetic patients who were still using, a chocolate, to be able to use sugar-free, or somebody who's on a keto diet, or I have a laundry list of allergy patients. So to be able to come up with a hypoallergenic product, to be able to come up with something that's really designed for medical use has been really nice because they pop up.
Talking about that, do you look at their in like the full picture of the patient as far as what they're eating, the exercise, or the activity levels? And
so I do, because I think it plays a part in what goes on. So a lot of my patients have two things that aren't discussed enough, in my opinion.
Yep.
One is constipation, and one is sleep.
Constipation definitely isn't brought up in there.
Right, right. And it's funny because it is a real problem. And I didn't realize that for a long time, because in the emergency department, I don't care if you're constipated.
Right. That's not an emergency.
It is. And I actually disimpact more patients than I've ever wanted to, which means I manually go in and retrieve poop out of people's butt.
Wow.
Just to be very clear.
Yeah.
But that's still not like, if you're coming in for an ache or a pain, constipation's not what I'm asking you about. Right.
Sure.
But in the office, on the other hand, I always ask because it plays into a lot of abdominal pain and discomfort.
Gut health, I would imagine.
What people eat,
mm-hmm.
and all of that plays into pain. And so, if you're uncomfortable because you haven't pooped in 5 days or you haven't pooped in 3 days, then it's going to play into it. Right. And it's going to play into your fibromyalgia, and it's going to play into your bloating and your sense of discomfort in your abdominal area. It's going to play into your IBS. It's going to play, it all kind of plays into one another. And then the other thing is that oil tinctures, what we're not talking about is it's oil. Right?
Yeah.
So anytime you're ingesting oil 3 times a day or 4 times a day, that's a laxative in and of itself, right? So it can cause, I've had patients come back after a few months and be like, I have diarrhea now from oils, right? Like I stopped taking the oils and the diarrhea stops. And so that aspect of things too, right? Like we kind of forget that this conversation really kind of ebbs and flows.
Yeah. You know, in the whole sleep portion, I think is obviously one of the hottest topics out there right now in health.
Yes.
It's getting some good exposure. You see a lot more articles being written, books coming out about the benefits of it. And even one of the startups I'm working with is this neuro training company. They're working with a lot of sports athletes, but they find out the basics of what everyone kind of gets back to.
Right.
You need more sleep. Most of these guys are like sleep deprived, and you're making bad choices.
Right.
Have you seen any research with, you know, people using it with like any type of EEG headsets to kind of track how their outcomes are after doing any type of CBD mix? Or what
so I work with the Pacific Neuroscience Institute, so PNI here, and we're seeing a lot of they're referring a lot of their patients over because we're getting some good outcomes, which is really nice, and because more importantly, we're seeing really bad outcomes with the hypnosedatives, so things that put you to sleep, Ambien, Lunesta, right? Sonata, that's the third one. So we're seeing, you know, there was like a big splash in the news a couple weeks back about how, you know, people are sleepwalking and sleep driving, and you know, there was somebody who claimed that they shot their spouse or somebody with a gun because they were on Ambien. I mean, there's all these like kind of things coming up, and the more important part is I see people who get into car and drive and have accidents,
right?
And they're on Ambien, they don't recall any of the events. And that we see in the emergency department. So the flip side is that, and then the other thing is that we're seeing poor memory, early onset Alzheimer's and dementia for people who are using Ambien and Lunesta and Sonata for long periods of time.
Wow.
So we actually can't, you know, most of these pharmaceutical companies, their studies are, you know, a year max.
Yeah.
You know, I rarely do see a 5-year study. Rarely. And so people always come up to me and they're like, well, where's the studies on THC long-term on your brain? I'm like, well, where's the study on Ambien long-term on your brain?
Yeah.
Where's the study on Norco on your brain long-term? And we know people are taking these for decades.
Yeah.
I can tell you very clearly what we're not seeing, which is, you know, the hippies of the 70s who were all smoking pot, and a lot of them continued, right?
It's a great point.
And what we're not seeing is a huge swing in you know, cancer outcomes with those patients. We're not seeing a huge thing in dementia with those patients. So what we're not seeing is also very valuable.
Wow.
And so that we're starting to see people looking into it. It's really hard to generate a clinical study without funding. It's really hard to get these things moving. It's really hard to get all of the processes up and going. So I'm looking forward to getting those studies coming out.
Yeah.
But, you know, I had a Parkinson's patient in the other day who came in for a follow-up, and she made me laugh because she's like, yeah, I took my cognitive study after 2 years, and now that I'm on cannabis products, she's like, I did better on my cognitive study now than I did 2 years ago.
Wow.
So, you know, this isn't to say this is everyone.
Yep.
And I even told her, I go, maybe it's the fact that you're not on all those narcotics anymore. You know, maybe that was also clouding your brain. And so it's kind of like looking at the both sides of the coin with this, right? Like, we can't assume cannabis does everything. It's not. I always say, we're not talking about snake oil. It's not magic.
Yeah.
It has its limitations. It has its benefits. It works on a lot of different organ systems, which is why we see it kind of crossing multiple different diagnoses and multiple different methods and modalities of treatment. But it does have its limitations.
You know, one more headline reading type of thing, and then I want you to plug everything about your clinic as far as how people can definitely find you. And we'll talk about the conference again one more time because I think that's important that people know about it. But you know, have you seen any real good research around using it for managing blood sugar levels? I mean, I've seen some headlines out there, but I didn't dive into it, so I'm willing to speak to in depth of what the things I've read.
I have not seen great research yet.
Yeah,
there is some. And they're looking at CBD bases tied into blood sugar. But if I had to put my money on anything, I think it's going to be the same combination. This fact of, you know, if your aches and pains are better, then you can get up and move. Sure. You can sleep better. Yeah. Then if you're moving better, then ultimately your blood sugars are going to drop, because we know exercise 100% is tied into your blood sugar.
Yeah.
So if I can get you up and moving even for 15 extra minutes a day, for sure that's going to drop your blood sugars.
That's awesome.
And that is my kind of goal, is to get you up and moving, because if I can, we don't talk about this very often, but a side effect of being happy, that it's not a bad side effect, right?
True. 100%.
Why do we forget to mention that this side effect of a positive attitude and happiness is a negative one? And it's not. It's not a negative side effect. It's actually, I consider, one of the best side effects of this medication. So, taking that with a grain of salt and saying that, that's actually strictly has to do with THC and not CBD, because CBD doesn't tend to affect the mood, although it does tend to calm anxiety and it helps with depression. It's not as mood elevating. Mm-hmm. But even if you get that 1 or 2% THC out of it, mixed in, or if you get a ratio medication with a little bit of THC, I think that's where it really can be very helpful.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you went there too, because the happiness portion of it is something that is almost kind of disrespected. I mean, not blatantly, but kind of that's not.
It's swept under the rug.
Right. Exactly.
We don't talk about narcotics being a depressant.
Right.
They cause depression.
Yeah.
It's a side effect of a narcotic.
Yep.
And why is that better? Why is that better? I mean, and I say this again, reflecting back to what we talked about earlier, which is, what are you running away from? Is it running away, or is it a pleasantness, right? And this is kind of the hard line here to kind of dig deep with people, but that's where you want to dig deep and get that next level of conversation.
I love what you're doing here at the clinic. I really enjoy the fact that you're having this conversation with people, and you're kind of being like their beacon of kind of light to say, this is where to kind of go, and really giving them some direction with it. I hope to hear you on the mic more and more.
Thank you.
I can't wait to actually see what's going on with the conference. So plug it again.
Okay, so let me plug this.
Yes.
So an educational conference on medical cannabis use coming in October 5th. This fall, 2019, from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. at the Intercontinental Hotel in Century City. Breakfast will be hosted, and you will have 5 speakers. I will highlight the most important speaker to me is Kim Kirchmeier is going to be coming from the Medical Board of California to talk about how the Medical Board of California has guidelines for cannabis recommendations for physicians. So this to me is just huge, because this is the first time she will ever be talking about medical cannabis guidelines for physicians ever in a public arena. I will be speaking about indications for cannabis use, and really I'm going to be delving into dosage, indications, frequency, ratios, that type of thing, and where and when you can use this, where and when it's beneficial. Dr. Phil Grob is going to be talking about, he's a geriatric psychiatrist, so he's going to be talking from a little bit of a different perspective about, medication interactions, how this can interact with medications, what you need to be cautious of, where it's indicated, where we're seeing benefits, especially with nursing home patients. This is kind of a subset of population that people in the recreational world don't talk about.
Yeah.
We love having nursing home patients because they do so well.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that whole line of business, but that makes perfect sense. You have people paying $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month to have their mom or their dad there, and
then they, a lot of nursing homes, the biggest complaint about nursing homes is that they just give them medicine to zonk them out, so that they don't have to deal with them, because dementia patients get aggressive, pain patients get aggressive. As we age, we tend to be a little bit more snippy or short. Right? Because we feel like we're owed that, maybe. I'm not sure. I'll let you know when I get there.
Right, me and you both.
But using a CBD-based medication during the day tends to calm a lot of that without sedating them. And so you get your old mom or dad back. And people really, it's really nice to see that. And they get better sleep at night without using a lot of these, sedatives that then cause constipation, or painkillers that cause constipation that then creates more problems. It's that downstream ripple effect. So Phil Grob, myself, we will have a medical cannabis lawyer there, Mr. Michael Levinson, who will be talking about rules and regulations. As we know, this changes very frequently.
Yep.
Almost kind of monthly these days, about what we can and cannot do, what's advised and not advised. And then of course, Robin Lynn from 1 Minute Cannabis. She's down in San Diego. She's also part of the SCC, and she's going to be doing an introduction about what is cannabis. So getting everybody up to the same page really quickly at the beginning of the conference so that we can all have a really intelligent, really detailed conference for the rest of the morning. It's really exciting. The LA County of Public Health will be there. They will be distributing their latest research on cannabis dispensaries here in LA.
Nice.
The Cannabis and Cannabinoid Research Journal out of UC Irvine is going to be distributing their journals so that people can see the real research that's going on in the scientific world about cannabis.
How about vendors? You going to have any
No.
companies
so there
there?
will be no vendors.
Purely educational right now.
Purely educational.
Yeah.
GW Pharma and Canopy Health have been invited from a pharmaceutical perspective to kind of help host.
Yep.
In terms of vendors, the only vendors we've asked to come will only be CBD hemp topicals.
Gotcha.
So creams and such of that type of variety, again, that are at places like Bed Bath & Beyond and Neiman Marcus, so that we can, because we're seeing a lot of that and it's very innocuous. And because the other problem was we don't want people pushing product. The goal of this conference is to not push product. Mm-hmm. The goal of this conference is to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Which is the most important part, and there's a lot of players out there. I'm sure they'll love to throw some dollars your way to have their space so they can sell out.
Yeah.
right.
No, and we're being really specific about this because
you don't want to tie your.
I don't want people to show up and be like, this was just a way to sell pot products. That's not the goal.
Yep.
The goal is to get people on the same page. And to get them resources to where they can get education on a continuous basis, where they can, CME will be provided, so continuing medical education credits are going to be hosted through the hospital here, Providence St. John's, so through the Department of Medicine. And again, getting people medical education. This is the start of it. It's not being done in medical school. I was not taught one thing about marijuana, cannabis, etc. besides it is illegal. Okay, nothing. I was taught more in the classroom. I was taught more about cocaine in the classroom than I was about marijuana.
Wow.
In residency, there was zero discussion of it besides, when you see it on a drug screen shows positive, like what do you do? What are the other things that can show up positive? Side effects, etc. We weren't even at the time, so back in the early 2000s, we weren't even talking about cannabis hyperemesis syndrome, which we didn't even get into today, but when people misuse it on a regular basis and use too much, okay? It causes nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain, which is really what most people think they're treating when they're taking it, so they take more of it.
Wow.
And then they cause worsening of their nausea, vomiting, and abdominal pain, and they take hot showers to kind of relieve themselves.
It's through edibles or just actually through smoking flowers? Mostly
we're seeing edibles. I smoke and then I take an edible and then I smoke and then it's like this kind of continuous process. And people are using a lot, and I always tell people you really shouldn't be taking more than a couple milligrams a day of THC unless there's a reason, right?
Yeah.
Unless there's a reason behind it. Most people don't need more than a few milligrams of THC a day. So kind of pulling together all of this in my medical education from, early 2000 to 2010, I had really almost zero medical education. And so the goal of this is to start that process and to make sure that we are educating our clinicians, because it's out, it's available. I mean, it needs to be discussed and it needs to be understood.
Well, you know what? I'm a huge fan of what you're up to. I love the fact that you're kind of doing the homework for a lot of people, because that's what people just don't have time for, right? And so if there's a place that we can get that concentrated dose of education about what's going on throughout the industry and how to properly read these labels that are just kind of being scatterbrained, right? And
that's right.
And I've even seen some of these marketing. I've been in a couple of these conversations, and they're all over the place from different. It really varies depending on where you get your source from. So
that's right.
So this is going to be fun. I'm going to spread this out. As you guys are listening, please go check out Dr. Sherry. Please plug how you can find
so
you.
It's www.therelief Institute, and that's relief spelled like a leaf on a tree, RELEAF.
Like that.
So thereliefinstitute.com. You can reach the conference site at thereliefinstitute.com/conferences, or if you just go to the Relief Institute, you'll see the tab for conferences, and it's on there. We are running a special for $2.99 for the whole conference, including breakfast, and we can offer you a group discount if you listen to this podcast, it's going to be group 50, and that'll give you a $50 discount.
Nice.
Otherwise, if you want to reach me on a more personal level and you want to come into the clinic or into the office, you can reach me at sherry@mdrelief.com. So Sherry, SHERRY at mdrelief, MDRELEAF, like the leaf on a tree.com, or 310-475-2626.
Love it. Love it. You know what? So I'm definitely going to plug all those in the show notes. You'll be able to talk to Dr. Sherry there. I'll have the coupons there. Please check it out, guys. Even if you're interested, this is open for everybody, right?
Open to everybody.
Not just docs. So for all you health coaches out there guessing.
Yes, health yeah, I mean, listen, they need to know.
100%.
They're doing it. They need to know. They need to know what's going on, what the latest research is, and they'll be better for it. I always tell people, I'm doing this kind of to hurt my own pocket a little bit, because what I'm going to do is teach you to do what I'm doing. Yeah. That's the goal, is you're right. Just teach you in one morning and pull together all of the resources for you, what I'm doing, and where you can find good resources if you have questions. Love it.
Dr. Sherry, we are out, and thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thank you.
All right, so was I right or was I right? She killed it. Tons of information. You guys should definitely look at checking out the conference, especially if you're in the SoCal area. I think it's just going to be great. It's a really good ecosystem for all of us to kind of just meet and connect with like-minded people, get some information as well. And, you know, if you're interested in this space, you definitely should be there. So with that said, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Please let me know your thoughts. You can get everything that you need at joealexlemon.work, or check out the show notes so you guys can at least stay connected with Dr. Sherry. So with that said, I look forward to checking you guys on the next episode.